ask Nat and other colleagues. Y Sara. Good morning. How is everybody doing? ¿Cómo están todos y todas? Como decimos en Costa Rica, pura vida. Muy bien. So, good morning. We have translation. Todos los que necesitan español tienen traducción. Sí. Gracias, Jamie, por la traducción al español. Thank you very much, Jamie, for the translation into Spanish. So, good morning. Welcome to our session, Rising to the Challenge, Driving Gender Responsive and Inclusive Climate Actions. My name is Lorena Aguilar. I am the Executive Director of the Kashak Institute for Women and Girls Empowerment at Binghamton University, and I will be just your moderator today. We have over 104 gender mandates since 2008. That's what we have at UNFCCC, and we have agreed that gender equality considerations and women participations are essential to climate solutions. Likewise, CSW 66, the first Commission on the Status of Women, for the first time in all their life, devoted in March of this year to the topic of gender and disaster mitigation. Unfortunately, despite these international frameworks, there is still a very long way to go to ensure that gender equality considerations are mainstream in public policies, as we're going to hear from Guatemala, and programs, as we're going to hear for our colleagues that are here, so that they harness the contribution of women and girls. COP27 is taking place in a context of growing urgency and demands at the global level to face the climate crisis and the loss of biodiversity and environmental degradation. It also occurs when rollbacks in gender equality driven by COVID-19 pandemic have worsened the position of women and girls in all spheres of life. Data show that there has been a setback of 18 years when it comes to gender equality. And these calls to actions are being raised in the context of profound inequalities, where persistent gender inequalities have been structural hallmark worldwide. Within this context, the side event will spotlight progress, including IUCN's uniquely positioned membership organization. Jamie at the far end is from IUCN, and it's an organization that serves as a catalyst of action and global partners across convention, civil society, and indigenous women's toward reducing what we call the structural knots of gender inequality. And those are the socioeconomic inequalities and poverty in the context of exclusionary growth, patriarchal, discriminatory, and violent cultural patterns, the sexual division of labor, and the unfair organization of care, which we tried very hard that it was on the last declaration that we were discussing here, the last mandate that was going to go out to SBI, but it was cut out. And the fourth, the concentration of power and hierarchical relations in public spheres. I will likewise to look at the leadership of the financial mechanisms, including the GEF, in driving gender responsive programming, in making a difference in women and rights girls' lives on the ground, and raising a voice to demand a more vision when it comes to implementation. And we're going to hear from our colleagues from the GEF a little bit later on. I will start now by presenting each one of our colleagues, but I'm also going to ask them to introduce themselves when I do that. So the first colleague that I'm going to present is Marlene Oliva. She is the gender focal point of the Ministry of Environment of Guatemala. And it's worthwhile notice that Guatemala just, I think it was like 10 days ago, it seems eternity, developed its first version of the climate change gender action plan. So Marlene, tell us a little bit, why did your country is taking action to develop inclusive and participatory climate change and action plans? Marlene, todo tuyo.
Gracias, buenos días. Aprovechando que hay traducción, voy a hablar en español. Es mi idioma materno y es donde mejor puedo expresarme en un tema tan importante. Espero su comprensión para los que hablan inglés. Ok, vamos a esperar un momento.
Usually it's the other way around. Usually it's the other way around. Everybody gets to listen to Spanish, but I mean, I think we're almost there, Marlene.
Yes.
We have 2 more online and that's it.
Bueno.
Sí, ya le están dando traducción. Bueno, Marlene, cuéntanos un poco más entonces.
Gracias, Jamie, por tenernos esta traducción y gracias a ustedes por comprender. Hablar en nuestro idioma materno es mejor. Así que quiero contarles, hace 2 semanas empezamos con la construcción del Plan de Acción de Género y Cambio Climático en Guatemala, gracias al apoyo de USAID aquí con Jamie y UICN, ¿verdad? Un trabajo conjunto entre ambas agencias y tenemos el gusto de tener como consultora a Lorena en esta elaboración del plan. Ha sido bien importante porque hemos hecho un proceso participativo donde las mujeres de Guatemala, de toda la nación, han participado en estos talleres. Acá tenemos a 2 personas de Guatemala, mujeres lideresas, ¿verdad?, que han estado aportando desde la institución también. Y eso ha hecho que el proyecto realmente sea bastante interesante, porque cuando conocemos qué es lo que quieren las mujeres, podemos hacer un mejor plan. Pero no solo ha sido así, también hemos trabajado con las instituciones de gobierno, cooperación, sociedad civil, empresa, y hemos hecho un proceso bastante participativo y hemos logrado tener el primer borrador del Plan de Acción de Género y Cambio Climático en Guatemala. Pero yo quiero contarles que tenemos algunas iniciativas que estamos muy emocionados en Guatemala y que realmente queremos implementarlas, ¿verdad? Así que yo hoy quiero compartírselas. Hay algo importante, el Plan de Acción de Género y Cambio Climático en Guatemala se está haciendo con las prioridades que tenemos en Guatemala en la NDC. Y en la NDC hemos priorizado 5 sectores. Y estos 5 sectores son los que tenemos acá, ¿verdad? Y tenemos 5 ideas que yo hoy quiero presentarles lo que queremos trabajar allí. En el tema forestal, queremos reconocer a las mujeres como agentes de cambio en la reducción y en la pérdida de bosques por medio de organizar y fortalecer brigadas de mujeres para control y prevención de incendios. En Guatemala, nuestras mujeres no las capacitan en el tema de prevención de incendios y saben que sus esposos emigran de sus lugares de origen y las mujeres se quedan y no son capacitadas. Así que este proyecto para nosotros es sumamente importante. Y también queremos hacer un programa de incentivos, ¿verdad?, para que las mujeres tengan bosques energéticos. En Guatemala el tema de leña es un problema y las mujeres cocinan en la mayoría de comunidades con leña. Así que creo que estos 2 programas pueden ayudarle mucho a las mujeres de las comunidades. En energía queremos hacer un proyecto de niñas ingeniosas, donde podamos tener más mujeres en carreras de STEM. Es importante, las mujeres pueden ser científicas, pueden ser ingenieras, ¿verdad? pueden ser tecnológicas, aunque algunas veces nos cueste la tecnología, pero no, cuando tenemos esa oportunidad de trabajar, podemos hacerlo. Y eso queremos trabajar en ese sector. En marino costero, en las reuniones que tuvimos, ¿verdad? Salió una idea de hacer una escuela de mujeres para que trabajen ahí. Nos contaban las mujeres que llegaron del área costera que no pueden tener una licencia para manejar bote, ¿verdad? O lancha, como le llamemos en cada país, ¿verdad? Y entonces queremos hacer esa escuela para enseñar a las mujeres y que las mujeres puedan tener todo lo que necesitan para poder trabajar en el tema de marino costero. En recursos hídricos queremos hacer proyectos de captación o cosecha de agua de lluvia. Cada vez el tema del agua se está haciendo un problema grande en nuestros países y queremos empezar a hacer proyectos innovadores con el tema de captación y agua de lluvias. Las mujeres no tienen acceso a los proyectos de riego, a los mini proyectos de riego, pero con esto queremos dar acceso a esto. En agricultura queremos establecer bancos de semilla dirigidos por mujeres. Las mujeres son las que recolectan las semillas, pero no son las que están allí. Así que es importante para nosotros hacer así. Y bueno, ya estamos a un paso del 2023, en enero vamos a ir nuevamente con Lorena, ojalá Jamie pudiera acompañarnos a hacer estos talleres de socialización para que todo Guatemala, vamos a hacer 7 talleres en las regiones de Guatemala, para que todas las personas que puedan participar y conocer sobre el Plan de Acción de Género y Cambio Climático. Yo quisiera hablar mucho más sobre este plan que realmente como Guatemala creemos que realmente dará una respuesta a esa diferenciación que hay entre hombres y mujeres y los efectos del cambio climático. Así que muchas gracias.
Gracias, Marlene, muchísimas gracias. Un aplauso muy fuerte por eso. Ahora I have now the honor for the official opening of our side event to introduce Ibrahim Thiaw, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, for some opening remarks. Ibrahim, for years, in every position you have really supported this topic, even when people didn't knew that it's worthwhile doing it and that it was important. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lorena. Sorry, I have a problem with my voice. I hope you can hear me. I'm really honored to be here and a little bit intimidated that I'm the only man on the row here. But it's a real honor. Lorena is, as she said, we worked together for many years, and she is the one that really gave me a real understanding of what gender means in terms of the environment and how you dissect different sectors from forest to water to land to biodiversity. So Lorena, you are my professor. Today I would like to talk to you about an issue that is very serious. Climate, land, and drought, and how these issues indiscriminately affect young people and women in particular. Let's look at the equation. We have a growing population in the world and a growing middle class, which means a growing demand on nature and its resources. So Paris Agreement says you have to reduce your carbon emissions and tend to a net zero by 2050. By the end of the century, you should phase out all emissions. At the same time, the Food and Agriculture Organization and other institutions that are in charge of feeding the world are saying that we need to double the production of food in order to feed the 9 billion people to come. We are 8 billion today or tomorrow. How do you reconcile the need to feed more people with the need to reduce your emissions? And you can do it by increasing the productivity per unit of land, or you can do it also by introducing some technology and some new types of financing and review the way we produce food in the world. But in order to do it, you have to work with the workforce that is in charge of feeding the world. The workforce in charge of feeding the world is essentially smallholders in many parts of the world. Of course, you have large corporations as well, but it's essentially the smallholders that are feeding the poor. And you look at that workforce of the smallholders, close to 40% of them are women, except they don't own the land. In most countries of the world, women produce, they are in charge of the processing and of trading the products, but they don't own the land. And what I also learned from a study which we published just this week, please look for it, is that in 108 countries in the world, so it's not only one region, it's 108 countries in the world, women are disinherited when they are widowed. They lose their property, sometimes they even lose their children, and they are sent back to their families of origin. Now, this is a major issue that I would like the world to pay attention to, and I would go beyond the outreach and the outcry and actually think about what solutions can be proposed there in order to reduce that gap. I think international financial institutions, I think NGOs, governments have a major role to play to raise the awareness about this issue. Because when I talk to world leaders, most of them seem to not be aware of the fact. So in the same way as we did very well in raising awareness about female mutilations, about inequalities, about promotions and elections, we should do the same for land. Because I have not seen as of yet a campaign for women's access to land. And I would like to really put this on the table because it's a major issue. I'll turn to drought because I was told I only have 5 minutes, so excuse me if I'm brief. Droughts are happening all over the world right now. It used to be a phenomenon that was attributed to some regions only, but today it is worldwide. Because we have the technology and the information and we can spot areas of the world that are hit by drought, we know that while Somalia and the Eastern Africa region is hit by the most severe drought in the last 40 years, Europe was hit this year by a drought they have not seen in 500 years. Australia, a drought that they had not seen in 800 years. United States of America, a drought that they had not seen in 1,200 years. So it is a global phenomenon. It is not only Africa, it is not only the Middle East, it is worldwide. Now, what happens when you have severe droughts in some areas like Somalia or most vulnerable communities? People flee. You should see how this affects in a very difficult way women and children. Because men are the first one to flee, to look for alternatives for the family. Not that they run away from their families, but on the contrary, they go to look for more resources and so forth. And then left in these villages are women, the elderly, and children. And I still have in mind a report that I read a month ago or 2 months ago about a woman called Fatima in Somalia. She was left with 3 children. And she walked for almost hundreds of kilometers to go to the next city where she can find aid. And in the way, one child died. And she was left with the other 2. And a reporter found her there. And she said, one of them is gone. I do not have energy to bury them because I want to save my energy to save the other 2. Imagine a mother that cannot bury their dead child because they want to save the other 2. And this reminded me of my childhood because I'm from Mauritania, and the Sahel was hit by the most severe drought early 70s, 69, 70, 72. And I lost my mother in 1969. I was not even a teenager. It was a most severe drought, probably the hardest that we had seen in dozens of years. And she died there. I still don't know why what killed her. But what came to my mind when I read that story from Fatima was to say, maybe my mother died because she was trying to save me. Because maybe I was one of the 2 children of Fatima that were to be saved. Maybe she died because she couldn't eat. She gave me the little food that she had in order to help me save my life. Maybe she died because she was gone somewhere else to find some food for me or clean water. And then she was hit by a virus. Probably it was a virus because it was sudden. Now, in times of drought, it's not only food, it's water. Water scarcity is killing people, especially women, who carry very heavy stuff to bring water, to fetch water from distance to their families. And this reminded me of another woman from Niger. 10 years ago, I read another article that she went for 7 kilometers to fetch water for her family. And she brought that water back home, and one of her children got a diarrhea from that water because the water was not clean enough. Imagine 7 kilometers carrying a water, breaking your back to bring water that would bring disease to your family. Imagine, this is the situation that women are facing in situations of land and drought. And we are here talking about climate change, but climate change has a face. It has a human face. And give it a woman's face, a gender perspective, and see what is it, what does it mean? It's not only the big meetings that we are here. It's not only the big conferences, the nice jets that are coming. It's not only the large conference rooms where nice speeches are being made. Millions of people are suffering day in, day out about climate change, and they are voiceless. So we hope that you here in this room and others will speak about the situation and the fate of those people who are not in this meeting room, but whose life is being affected day in and day out by the issue of climate change. Climate change is real. It's not a phenomenon. It's not a science fiction. It's not a political campaign subject. It is actually about people's life. And unless we are able to put ourselves into their shoes, we will not be able to discuss and to have an agreement amongst ourselves, because we seem to have flags when we discuss. Your flag against mine, your budget against mine. We are here in the same boat. As Martin Luther King said, I like to repeat this, we may have come from different ships. He was talking to black community in the US. We may have come from different ships, but now we are in the same boat. And we have to see how we can come to an agreement to actually resolve that fundamental problem of ours, which we have in the same planet we live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahim. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your stories. Thank you for putting in perspective the real problem. This is a matter of life and death. It's a matter of life and death for millions of women all around the world. And thank you again for your long-standing commitment to gender equality. If it wasn't for your passion and your commitment, the convention will not be where it is. And I have seen you always talking about these issues. For you, it's not a matter of a fashion. You really believe in this. And I know that you might need to leave because you have other commitments. But from the bottom of my heart and from all of us, thank you. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Wow. He's incredible. And taking time to come and to be with us and to speak with us, I mean, that is what he really believes. And we're very honored to have had him. So now I also have the tremendous honor of introducing Lucy Mulenke. Lucy is the Executive Director of the Indigenous Information Network, Chair of the GEF's Indigenous People Advisory Group. This is a unique role. I think, Lucy, you are the first woman, right? To be in that position in the GEF. I think in the past, Oli might correct me or somebody from the GEF, but I think it's the first time that we have a woman and an African woman in that position, what I think that is also very important. So Lucy will address the concentration of power and hierarchical relations in the public sphere and how elevating the next generation of young indigenous women leaders is important. Lucy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, so it works? Can't hear. I think this is much better. Thank you very much, Laureen, and thank you for organizing this event. And actually, I like very much the presentation by the Executive Secretary of the UNCCD, the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. And what he spoke, I think, Laureen, is something that we need to document such stories, because we have the young generation whom you have just mentioned about young women who need to learn and hear. And it reminds me very well, just I think 2 months ago, one young man, to tell you how that the same stories are still existing. He's from the pastoral areas in Kenya, and he said all his life he's never seen his mother sit down to eat, because his mother is always looking food for the children, trying to feed them. So you see, it's a story that is continuous. It's also very important, as we are here speaking today about rising, driving gender responsive and inclusive climate actions. I think it's a high time we really take action, collective action, that we move on. Because we've been speaking for quite some years, but the same issues are still on. From the indigenous communities whom I work with in the African region and also in the rest of the world, we find that the issues are still the same. The women are still stressed because of the drought that was just mentioned, because of the climate change, and also because of the land issues, clearly saying how it is that most of the women do not own land, even though in some of the constitutions in our countries, they have indicated that women have the right to own land. But in the true sense and in the practical sense, most of them, especially indigenous women, don't own that land. And apart from that issue of owning land, because it's kind of a chain that moves all along, the question of even land issues alone and land tenure issues is a problem, and it's a problem for many countries, and especially our region. It's a problem that is causing much more problems and challenges even to the climate change, because you see that the land of the indigenous people are being encroached, forest areas are being encroached, and you find that the communities themselves don't have their own, they don't own it, and they become so, everything becomes problematic, that they have to take some actions which are not there. Like, why should somebody else come and take my land and destroy it? So let me also destroy it. And that is not the way that we want to move on. So we really need to look at some of the very important issues so that we can all be able to move together. When we talk about gender responsive, we are talking about women, we are talking about young people, and we are also talking about men in our communities, because gender is for all. So every time we discuss these issues, we have to look at both sides. We have to look at women, we have to look at men, because even when we work, as from the traditional communities, we know that our elders, who are mostly men, have got the say. Our governments, whose majority of the population have the say. I like the idea and the presentation from Guatemala. This step that they have taken is something that we all need to learn and maybe have a way of exchanging. And you don't only exchange issues just by going to visit, but we could also maybe, Lorraine, have a recommendation to see how exchange visit online can also be organized, so that the governments themselves can also learn from each other, and we can also learn from the other women, maybe in Guatemala. We work very closely with Guatemala because in biodiversity we have different activities that we've been working together with Guatemala, with the International Indigenous Forum. Actually, my co-chair is from there. And every time we emphasize on people really learning from each other. The other very important point that I want to bring upon is to see that as from the where we are now, we are in a certain staircase of around 66 staircase. We need to have the young people start learning. We need to transmit this knowledge. We need to work with them. And I'm really glad that IUCN and other partners have also embraced that and have now young people working with them and trying to take them step by step and actually having other elders to mentor them. This is very, very important. My recommendation is for partners and for all that are working on different issues, especially on environment, on climate change, biodiversity, and desertification and all the Rio conference, it's very important if you think of how you can introduce academies whereby the young people can also learn from different, they can learn from each other, they can be taught in different ways, still on online, because I think COVID brought some changes to our lives, that we do almost everything online together, and that can be very, very important so that they can also be learning from each other. Because sometimes travel also becomes very expensive and so on. The other very important thing is that apart from promoting the work of the different activities, let's remember that down there in the grassroots, the rural women are the ones who are even suffering more and carrying the burdens. I was so glad that he mentioned it and seeing how they struggle to make sure that the ends meet. And some of these young people, we are saying we promote them and we really educate them and mentor them, is for them to go back to the community and try to help the women and the other community members to also rise up and be able to get these challenges. There are so many instruments that have been put in place. There are so many declarations about Paris, about what we had in Glasgow, Copenhagen, all that story, if you can follow it very clearly. But what does it mean to a local woman at the grassroots level? What does it mean for that woman out there and the girls in school? Even we don't even have to say about the rural, but also imagine even those who are already working there, some of them government people, have never even seen that Paris Declaration. So we must really see how we really wake up and take actions that are really responsive to have everybody aware, everybody active, so that we can make a difference. People speak about climate change all the time, and others see like it's a fashion of speaking. Just like sometimes we as indigenous people, when we are mentioned all throughout, we see like it's a fashion or something, but it's real issues, it's real challenges. We need to look at that very well. And when I talk about those declarations, is also to see how do we really, if we have to take action, we also have to see how these awareness and also capacity building on these instruments that we have be undertaken within our own communities, our own lands, and use languages and local languages and so on. We ourselves from biodiversity have learned from other communities. As far as Mexico, they speak their own languages, but we have borrowed it and tried to make as much as possible use of that. So it's very important to have that. Within our own communities and within women, among women, we have learned to do exchange visit among ourselves face to face to learn from each other. I think this is very good and very good dialogues that we need to really make sure that we can promote such dialogues to be able to reach out to them. One other thing, Lorraine, is that it's very important to see how do we link the work that is being done by IUCN, by different partners on gender. How do we link it together so that we can be able to see how we can all collectively work together, promote the issues together, and make sure that we all understand the same things together. So I think that's what I wanted to bring up, and thank you so much, and sorry for taking
Lucy.
time.
Thank you for your wise words. And I think one important thing in relation to what you said to Marlene, right now the Gender Action Plan of Guatemala has a lot of these clinics we're calling South-South interchange. And Guatemala has already made a decision to write a readiness initiative for the Green Climate Fund next to us, exactly to learn. I mean, if these are women firefighters in some parts of Latin America, they can teach these women how to do it. If there are rainwater catchers in other parts of the world that can support, or on management of ancestral seeds. So that is very much embedded. And the nice thing, Lucy, it came from the women. The most innovative ideas came from the women for their solutions. And with that, I then move to Sara Bow. Sara Bow es vicepresidenta de la Junta de Actenamit. Actenamit ha sido una organización. Steve, ¿cuántos años tienes ya Actenamit? ¿Cuánto? 33 años. ¿O 30? 30 años. Me acuerdo cuando comenzó Actenamit, ¿verdad? Fue una de las primeras organizaciones en una Guatemala tumultuosa, porque ahora podría decirse, bueno, es muy sencillo, pero en aquella época trabajar con el tema indígena en Guatemala era poner en riesgo la vida de uno mismo, ¿verdad? En esos temas. Entonces, Sara, cuéntanos desde tu perspectiva, ¿cuál es el llamado que hacen las mujeres indígenas en cuanto al tema de acción?
Bien, buenos días. Gracias Lorena y gracias Jamie y a la UNFCCC por tomarnos en cuenta y tener este diálogo. Quiero hacer énfasis, ¿verdad? Como la ICI y a través de la UNFCCC y CI están invirtiendo en fortalecer las capacidades principalmente de las organizaciones indígenas, y como la demanda es que los fondos lleguen directamente, ¿verdad?, a las organizaciones locales, creo que es importante llevar procesos de formación principalmente para las mujeres. En Guatemala, como decía Lorena, ¿verdad?, en la institución donde yo trabajo, está liderado por mujeres indígenas y nos basamos mucho en brindar oportunidad en educación a niñas y mujeres jóvenes, principalmente de las áreas rurales. ¿Y cómo lo hacemos? En este proceso de formación que se lleva o que se implementa en Guatemala, también en coordinación con el gobierno, porque es importante también tener alianzas con diferentes entidades para poder crear mecanismos de fortalecimiento para capacidades, para niñas, para mujeres jóvenes, principalmente indígenas. Nosotros estamos llevando a cabo un proceso de formación para formar a mujeres educadoras ambientales. Creo que es importante también esas acciones, que también las mujeres tengan como el conocimiento de tener una certeza jurídica y también el acceso a la tierra. Es importante también que muchas instituciones se enfocan en el cuidado de la tierra y también aprovechar la tierra, porque hay muchas regiones en mi país que hay mucha pobreza y mucha pobreza extrema, y creo que la formación es importante llevarlo a cabo. Por eso también, y me interesa mucho el plan que está realizando Marlene en Guatemala. Creo que también tenemos que hacer alianzas, ¿verdad?, para ir fortaleciendo estos procesos y que se tomen en cuenta también a la juventud.
Sara,
muchas gracias.
¿Cómo comenzaste vos? Cuéntanos un poquito, porque Ibrahim nos habló de un proceso muy propio. ¿Cómo comenzó Sara a ser una mujer joven líder?
Sí, creo que es grande la historia, pero hay muchos estereotipos de género, principalmente, ¿verdad?, en las familias. Yo me crié, ¿verdad?, en una familia que el liderazgo lo tiene que tener siempre el hombre. Entonces mis hermanos siguieron estudiando, pero yo no tuve acceso. Entonces yo empecé a trabajar para poder yo seguir estudiando. Como yo vivo cerca de la institución de Actenamit, entonces creo que Actenamit abrió muchas brechas, muchas barreras, porque habían muchos jóvenes que no tenían acceso a la educación, y nosotros somos producto de eso, porque yo estudié en la asociación, porque ellos iniciaron con un programa de salud y luego un programa de educación, que ahora tenemos más de 2,000 jóvenes ya graduados y que ellos también tienen acceso a un trabajo digno. Entonces yo así empecé y luego por la capacidad que yo tenía y ya tenía como un estudio académico para poder trabajar ya de manera formal, entonces me tomaron en cuenta en la asociación para poder brindar mis servicios.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, ahí está el compromiso de muchísimos años, de mucho trabajo en este tema y que sí se puede, lograr, porque muchas veces no invertimos a donde se hace la diferencia. Sí.
Sí, creo que es importante. Nosotros también llevamos a cabo un proceso de investigación para el cambio, se llama, basado en la realidad, y nos dimos cuenta, ¿verdad?, que en la región donde yo vivo, la región Quechí, hay muchas barreras críticas, principalmente en la barrera digital. Creo que también es importante que las cooperaciones tomen en cuenta que es importante apoyar a muchas mujeres para eliminar, ¿verdad? O no tanto eliminar, pero las brechas digitales es importante también que las mujeres tengan acceso para que ellas puedan llevar estas capacidades y apoyar a las mujeres en las comunidades.
Muchísimas gracias, Sara. Un aplauso a Sara. Muchísimas gracias. Now I have the honor of introducing Jamie. Jamie, we will not be here if it wasn't for you. We're here because you are a woman that have a passion for inclusion, that really believe that the voices of all of us must be heard. And Jamie works for IUCN. She's the gender program coordinator. My tablet already went down. We're trying with new technology, but it doesn't look very good, and I don't know now the code. So I'll have to do it the best way that I can. So, Jamie, thank you. Thank you for making this possible. And now you have the floor, my dear.
Let's see if this works. Oh, this works. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lorena, so much for the introduction. And I guess
think
maybe this one's live. There we go. Thank you. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Lorena, for the introduction. I want to thank everyone for all the side events that are happening now on a very busy day. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. And I really want to thank all of our speakers today for all the stories, insights, experiences, advice that they have to share with us, because that's why we're having this conversation. We want to talk about implementation, and IUCN, I'm so glad to be here. We're so deeply honored to be able to sit here alongside global leaders, community leaders, and discuss exactly this topic about implementing gender-responsive climate action. At IUCN, our message to COP27 on gender has actually been very simple. It's that we need to raise our ambitions and we need to scale implementation. We just need to take action. I'd like to share a little bit about how at IUCN we've been trying to move some of these pieces and these dials forward, both in terms of what we've been doing in the past and what we're up to these days, trying to contribute a little bit of our part to it. At IUCN, we have an interlinked three-pronged strategy when it comes to gender and climate change. The first is that we identify the information gaps that need to be filled, because we can't act on what we don't know and what we don't measure and what we can't build information on and convince others to come along with us. Once we have the new information in hand, we work across our union, we work with partners to really try and build the substantive case for why gender integration needs to be meaningfully throughout all policies and plans alike. Once we've actually been able to make those cases where we have been able to, we work closely through tailored technical support and various capacities, both on the ground, at a programmatic levels, at policy levels, to make sure that together we move forward. One example is many years ago now, at the UNFCCC, gender integration was not on the agenda. And IUCN, alongside many allies, many partners, were able to be here and help galvanize attention and policy action by working together through things like the Global Gender and Climate Alliance. IUCN has also supported 28 countries and regions and subnational regions as well in designing and launching climate change gender action plans like the one Marlene was telling us about today in Guatemala. And the latest IPCC report, AR6, this year also recognized CC gaps themselves as one of the few gender-responsive climate policy design examples that are out there. And there are many other solutions, and I think that it's really important that we just need to take action and continue to invest in creating these inclusive policies together. Today, many of these countries are now using their CC gaps to inform their NDCs and their climate strategies to try and build blueprints for inclusive, gender-responsive climate action. Lately, we've also been building knowledge and action on gender-based violence and environment linkages, and I'm here to tell you a little bit more today about that area of work. In 2020, we published a landmark study on the topic, and we found that gender-based violence is used as a way to reinforce existing privileges relating to the environment, and that climate change is a stressor that threatens the conditions and worsens risk levels across the globe, and there is no place in the world that is exempt from this. As droughts linger, we've heard people talk about throughout these discussions these weeks, child marriage is increasing as a negative coping mechanism for families, hoping that bride wealth will help make ends meet. And I think I really champion what His Excellency Ibrahim was saying about the face of climate change being a woman's face, but also we need to remember that for many, many girls, every day as the climate worsens, the face of climate change is also the face of girls, where their futures are no longer what it could be because we are not taking enough action and because we are leaving them behind. As storms continue to batter communities, LGBTQI+ people have been left out of emergency shelters to face the elements alone. And as climate change continues to worsen alongside biodiversity loss, increased degradation, we've also heard many of our esteemed speakers today talk about the longer journeys that women and girls are having to take to conduct care work, like collecting food, fetching water, and also resourcing fuel like firewood. And these journeys also take so long that we've also been hearing more and more that it increases violence at home when these journeys are deemed to be taking quote unquote far too long. And these findings demonstrated for us that we really needed to take urgent action. So we created the Gender-Based Violence and Environment Linkages Center to mobilize action. We've since worked with many various partners to make sure that these climate impacts do not remain hidden or left behind. And I am happy to share that there has been some progress and we have been moving the dial forward in some spaces. At IUCN, we just launched a new information brief and a companion summary with UN Women about this topic. We highlighted the conclusions and recommendations from this year's Commission on the Status of Women, which, among other things, of course, talked about climate change for the first time in its history. Within these conclusions and recommendations, state parties not only called for things like gender-responsive, nature-based solutions and climate actions, but also recognized gender-based violence and climate linkages throughout. The information brief also highlights brand new data from IUCN that I'm really pleased to share that there are now 28 countries in the world that specifically pinpoint, acknowledge, and identify actions as well about gender-based violence and climate change linkages within national climate change policies and plans. And we really hope that the momentum on this continues to evolve into a critical mass in the near future. Alongside many other gender policies, the GEF and GCF as crucial finance mechanisms have also developed gender-based violence safeguards as well. And this year, the UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women for the first time also explored the climate change issue, publishing a report for the first time on this topic. And as a co-lead of Generation Equality's Action Coalition on Feminist Action for Climate Justice, at IUCN, we've also made commitments to make sure that gender-based violence and climate change linkages are also included there as a bridge between the FACJ and the GBV Action Coalitions. And for just a few moments now, for a few minutes, I want to share a little bit about our ambitions for making sure that this work actually reaches the ground. Earlier this year, IUCN also launched its first call for proposals under the Resilient, Inclusive, and Sustainable Environments Grants Challenge. This grants challenge was based on IUCN's research and is a unique funding mechanism that is designed to support environmental organizations and initiatives to collaborate with women's groups and community-based organizations to address these linkages and try to close the gap. Because we are learning together by doing it together. We're running the Grants Challenge with the support of the United States Agency for International Development, which ran 2 previous rounds under RISE. This year at IUCN, we received an overwhelming 375 proposals, despite narrowing our geographic scope to 3 regions in Eastern and Southern Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and the Caribbean. And we hope to share the winning proposals with you soon. But in the meantime, what I really wanted to highlight today, and especially in this space, is that we're calling on the organizations that we're funding to include community-based organizations within not only the project activities, but also the budgets, so that the expertise and the experience that we learn together, develop together, centers the priorities, concerns, and solutions of the community members themselves. We're doing this because our models cannot approach climate justice if the investments do not also reach and include the very people that they are about. Engagement has to be more than consultation. It needs to mean partnership. And much of the work that we'll be doing are things like building tools, capacity building, but also engaging men to champion gender equality and gender safety. COVID-19 really did roll back gender equality for many people. In previous years, global estimates held steadily that approximately 1 in 3 women and girls in her lifetime will experience sexual violence or intimate partner violence. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, those figures are estimated to be rising to 2 in 3. On a more personal note, I will share that when gender-based violence first touched my life, I was 8 years old. And it has drawn colors of black and gray all over my life since then as I've tried to, move forward in my journey. And I know that many people in this room understand exactly what I'm talking about and know very well what I mean. And I just want to say that all people have the human right and hope to live a life free from violence, and that violence based on gender is an ugly expression of discriminatory patterns that construct our realities for far too many of us. And as climate impacts grow and negatively accelerate gender-based violence, we need to remember that the climate agenda is as much about people as it is anything else. Thank you.
Wow. 2 extremely moving stories, Ibrahim. And Jamie, don't kill me for saying this, but this is the first time that Jamie speaks in a panel of this type. And sharing such a emotional story, Jamie, thank you for being so brave, and thank you for transforming that pain into something positive. So thank you very much for that, Jamie. So I now open the floor to questions, doubts to our panelists. Anybody that wants to ask them anything. We have Spanish and English translations, so we can do that. Anyone.
And we also have reflections as well that we want to invite a few people as well. Yes. Actually, Mana, is it okay if I ask you first for some reflections?
Hi everyone, my name is Mana Umar. I'm from Kenya. I'm a youth leader of the Feminist Action for Climate Justice Action Coalition. I'm also the founder of a grassroots organization. It's an NGO that works with women that are most affected by the climate crisis. And I'll give a few reflections on that basis as a youth and also as a founder of a grassroots organization that works with women who are most affected. So during this meeting, we've seen, or the panelists have echoed on challenges faced in driving gender responsive and inclusive climate actions, as well as what we should do to address this and potentially rising up to the challenge. So most of the points echoed by the speakers go hand in hand with conclusions of the CSW-66, the Commission on the Status of Women, that is capacitating women and girls to take actions and build resilience through, for example, improving women's access to education, knowledge, land ownership, financial services, etc. This is among the conclusions of the CSW-66. So my key takeaways are there is not enough action that is being done to actually propagate this. And if it is there is a gap as a result of the in terms of the role youths and grassroots communities take in advancing this. So my idea is, can we find a solution or a way of engaging youth-led grassroots organizations to actually capacitate women that are most affected, because most of these youths are from either these communities or are working with these communities, so we will be directly impacting lives of people who have been affected. Already we have a lot of initiatives, youth-led initiatives that are doing this. However, they lack the support to achieve full impact. As we know, the bureaucracy of the donor world. There's also a need for us to push gender equality to be mainstreamed in the policy instruments and to ensure women, and especially those from most affected communities, are in the decision-making rooms and spaces. And I think we can achieve this through advocacy. Thank you.
I'm also going to ask Nat. Nat, come here. Natalie Isiak is one of these also wonderful, amazing women who has been working with an initiative that is called 1 Million Women in Australia. And Nat is going to tell you a little bit more of what it is, but thanks to her networks and her work, she has been, it has been possible to reduce thousands and thousands of tons of carbon, all done by women. So Nat, what did you hear today? You are always putting a call for action. So what was your impression of today's interventions?
Well, thank you so much for giving this opportunity to say a couple of words and my reflections. And thank you so much to all of you for the extraordinary work that you're doing. And I think what has come through that is just so important, and His Excellency Ibrahim and all of you have, talked about, it's the storytelling, it's the raw honesty that comes through the storytelling that we need so much more of, because what you've demonstrated today is that when you tell your story, it touches, it hits our hearts. It doesn't just sit up here in our heads. It travels right to our hearts. And I think to what I've learnt through being the founder of 1 Million Women, and I'm from Australia, and our community of women, we've really come from a place where we were not engaged on this issue at all. For me, I was a cosmetics manufacturer. I thought climate change was someone else's issue. I had no idea of the effects on women for such a long time. And then I had an epiphany, and I changed, and I started 1 Million Women because I knew that we had to step into our agency and live climate action through everything we do. And I think that this decade needs more women to speak our truth to power. And just recently I wrote a book called Right Here, Right Now, how women can lead the way in this climate emergency. And I think that what I've witnessed in Australia is women going from the camp of inaction through to action through the way that they live, and that when you act in your lives, what I've witnessed in Australia, when you live climate action, it helps you find your voice and your confidence, and it helps you to influence others and to put pressure on governments. And to be honest, there's not enough women in my country acting on climate change, and I think the more that we can tell our stories and connect with others, we will resonate with many more women. And so it's my commitment for the next 2 years that that's what 1 Million Women is going to do. We're going to do everything possible to reach another million women. We are going to empower them to live climate action, to engage their politicians, and to speak our truth to power. And so thank you so much, and thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Jamie. Yes, I think we have 2 questions. Sí, señora embajadora, qué lindo verla. Hello, hello. She used to be Costa Rican ambassador to Kenya. Um, vamos a ver si este sirve. Si no le paso otro. ¿No?
No.
Not, I mean, where do we have another one? Okay. And then we'll share
Hello.
if they have questions. Sí, ahora sí
Yes.
te oímos.
Good morning. Yes, I have been ambassador and working a lot with gender and climate change. But I have a very important question, I think, for all of us. Women are the more vulnerable. So, but to implement all that we are talking about, we need to, the question is how we can increase climate finance that is gender responsive. And not only that, that is also accessible to girls and to women. And this is one question of the millions, but I think this is very key in this COP to ask how we can have finance to driven gender responsive and inclusive climate actions, which we need to put in the agenda of the outcomes of this 27 COP in Egypt, because we talk about that we need to take action, and we need also to take bold action and to implement. No more, talking about the problems, but about the solution and the implementation. Thank you,
Gracias,
Madam
embajadora.
Vice Chancellor.
I'm going to then let all the panelists say something about finance. Jamie, and then GEF.
Let's see, does this work? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's a fantastic question because finance is the catalyst for making things happen. I think that, with the financial mechanisms, they all have strong gender policies, and what we really need to see is further integration and implementation, and we also need to see more transformation of various sources to really up the ante on inclusive access. But beyond that, I think, I'm a person that also just does things, so I think for me, my take and the thing that I try to do every day and the things that we try as a team at IUCN to try and do every day is wherever you have an initiative, wherever you have anything, do it. Include gender, make sure the voices are in the room, make sure there's budgets included. I think it's a difficult question, but wherever we're able to, we should be able to add it.
Thank you, Jamie. Lucy.
Yes. I think it's very important for those who have got access to those funding, to the money, because since last year there was that money which was pledged. But honestly speaking, it has not reached to where we thought it could. But if any one of the donors, any one of the partners has access to this funding, it's very, very important to remember to take the money to the grassroots. And it's very important to have indigenous peoples, local communities and others to have access to that funding, so that they can take action and innovations that
So
they
we're
have
talking
already.
about simpler systems and for direct access to resources, like the one that the Adaptation Fund created.
Exactly. Let it go straight to the community, based, and really guide the communities to be able, because they can manage. They've been managing.
But you know,
Lucy,
Lucy, and now we can pass it to Marlene. The reason why we couldn't get to a decision or a mandate in this COP is because there was no agreement on the finance issues. It was stopped, it was blocked, in addition to human rights, in addition to mentions to IPCC report that is great on gender. But Marlene, tell us a little bit how that was a stop precisely there.
De acuerdo, la pregunta del millón. En las negociaciones de género pasamos todo el tiempo viendo el tema de financiamiento y no logramos avanzar. No aceptaron las propuestas y se fue a presidencia de la COP. ¿Qué pienso yo que se debe de hacer? Creo que todas las personas debemos poner, desde las comunidades hasta los grandes, ¿sí? Acá cada proyecto de cooperación debe exigir consideraciones género responsivas. Porque ¿qué pasa con esos géneros responsivos? Tienen que inyectar plata. Las mujeres ya estamos capacitadas y tenemos un proceso fuerte en ese tema. pero no nos está llegando el financiamiento, no les está llegando a las comunidades. Entonces debemos de tener propuestas más directas, claves en todos los proyectos de cooperación, pero también en los presupuestos nacionales. Nuestros países deben también asumir y todas las personas debemos de poner el presupuesto directo para género responsivo, si no, no vamos a avanzar.
Yeah, yes, quiero hacer la referencia. I would like to make the reference also to what Natalie said. Yes, these stories have reached my heart, but I want them to reach the wallets of those that are really involved in this process. Because they usually said, oh, that's a very nice story. Yes, transform that sentiment into direct access and simpler forms so that women all around the world, in our rural communities, in our poorest countries, can have access to those resources. Y Sara, cuéntanos un poco, ¿llegan los recursos a donde ustedes están? ¿Llegan los recursos como deberían de llegar a las comunidades, estos millones que maneja el Green Climate Fund y el GEF? Estamos entre ellos dos.
Pues a nosotros nos encantaría que llegaran esos recursos, pero lamentablemente no. Creo que hay que tener un plan de trabajo muy concreto y considerar y tener la participación de las mujeres, porque realmente hay muchas comunidades olvidadas. Si no llegan en los gobiernos, bueno, por si llegan en los gobiernos también creo que tener ese vínculo con el gobierno y hacer cabildeo, hacer incidencia, porque eso es lo que nosotros hacemos en Guatemala. Insistir hasta que den algo.
Sí, creo que nos hace falta. We need also to think. I mean, when you go to the ground and you talk to a lot of women organizations and local organizations and grassroots organizations, they have no idea who is the focal point for the Green Climate Fund or the GEF, or they don't know. They don't know that these mechanisms have gender policies. They don't know that those gender policies are being designed already so that we can participate. So I think that we need to do a lot more of mobilization to make sure that those resources get to where they are. I'm sorry. Another question. Anybody has another question? I think I saw. Yes, por favor.
1, 2, check. 1, 2.
Muchas gracias. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists for what was a truly inspiring and very interesting event. You spoke a lot about barriers, las barreras. Often the lives of women and girls are filled with barriers to technology, to education, to land, to food security, etc. And these are only made worse by the effects of climate change. Now there's a set of barriers that we work at my organization, the Margaret Pike Trust, that were not mentioned in the panel today, but they're so very relevant to women and girls' lives. And these are barriers to rights-based and voluntary family planning. And they intersect very much with access to education, access to income-generating activities. Because how can I, as a woman or a girl, engage effectively in my education or engage effectively in an income-generating activity and hope to have my own future, balance my productive and my reproductive role in my family, in my society, in my community, if I don't have access to those services. So we want to highlight and congratulate the work of the IUCN, who have been very open to this notion, the links between voluntary and rights-based family planning to biodiversity and also to climate change. In fact, our organization led the passing of a landslide resolution at the IUCN, and we now have a task force on biodiversity and family planning. So the linkages are very clear. The linkages with climate adaptation and resilience building are also very clear. Many countries are integrating this into their climate policies. Uganda is one example. Perhaps your country might be the next one. And as Jamie said, often large organizations, convening bodies, participatory processes like those through the IUCN can really galvanize action and can be the key. So I really look forward to continuing the conversation with IUCN to keep moving forward on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. We have another, I mean, it was a comment more than a question, but I do want to point out that as far as I know, in the three major Rio conventions, there is no mention of this topic in the mandates. There is no mention of care work in any of the mandates of the three conventions. And I really thought that this time we were going to be able to put care there and reproductive rights, but it was completely blocked. So there's still a lot of work to be done on this, and thank you very much for doing that very special work. Can you please let us know your name and the question?
Thank you so much. My name is Fatima Ahmed, and I'm from Sudan. I'm one of the founder and president of grassroots women organization called Zainab for Women Development Organization. Thank you. I came with Lucy Group, the Indigenous Network. And my question and comment, because we keep talking about this issue of unaccessible climate funds and adaptation funds and all that, and this is still there. And now we're talking about the implementation. So how can we move with this implementation unless first ensure that there is accessible funds for especially grassroots and indigenous communities and local communities? And the good things, we work with very limited funding, but we have real success stories in adaptation for climate change with women groups who are most affected communities and who are the most affected people. So we need to work together, and to learn about the success stories at different communities, so it can be a model, it can be scaled up, it can be replicated. And I think it is time now to really lobby and advocate strongly as women to have portion, like specific percent of this funding for women grassroots
Correct.
organization. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much. That was actually something that we have discussed a lot, this percentage. And actually, Marlene, um, the CCGAP of Guatemala talk about a specific percentage, habla de contar con fondos de financiamiento específicos y tal vez Lucy o Sara quieran hablar de eso también, pero tal vez tú nos cuentas cómo en el CCGAP se habla de tener fondos específicos para las mujeres.
Gracias. Bueno, creo que sí me escuchan, ¿verdad? Bueno, creemos, y yo vuelvo a decir, sin financiamiento no podemos hacer nada. Así que en esta CCGAP, ¿verdad? En este Plan de Acción de Género y Cambio Climático en Guatemala, tenemos proyectos, ¿verdad? Que queremos ir y ver cómo conseguimos financiamiento y demostrar las acciones, ¿verdad? Porque si no, no podemos, o sea, seguimos teniendo buenos documentos, pero no acciones. Y eso es lo que estamos haciendo. En el poco tiempo no podía contarles todo, ¿verdad? Pero sí estamos dejando esa puerta abierta, ¿verdad? Para ir, tocar y empezar a ver ese financiamiento. Con lo que decía la colega con el tema de salud reproductiva, muy de acuerdo con usted. En mi país ese es un problema fuerte. Y tal vez si no lo hemos visto dentro del cambio climático que sí afecta, deberíamos de empezar a ver esas agendas, y que dentro de mi país lo ve otro ministerio, pero sí hay que empezar a trabajarlo y a empujar en esto.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Now, I'm going to ask each one of the panelists a sentence before we do the closing. A sentence that people can take. What will be yours, Jamie?
This microphone works. Okay, great. I think the one sentence is I'll repeat what I said before. We need to raise ambition and scale implementation and increase access to funds. That's what we really need.
Thank you. Lucy.
Access funds to the grassroots, the indigenous, local grassroots women in remote areas to ensure our objectives.
Thank you, Lucy. Marlene.
Necesitamos que el financiamiento llegue.
Pronto.
Y Sara.
Pues creo que incrementar la participación para unificar esfuerzos y que los fondos lleguen directamente a los pueblos.
Y yo voy a decir, unlike the coronavirus, there is not, nor will be, a vaccine against gender inequality. The time of action has never more urgent than today. And with that, I will now have the honor for the closing of the event to ask Patricia Marcos Huidobro from the GEF, Senior Climate Change Specialist, to offer us some final thoughts.
Thank you everyone. It has been an honor for the Global Environment Facility, the GEF, to host this inspiring touch side event. This is a topic that is really close to us. We all realize that gender is strongly influence people's relationship with nature, dependence upon it, and access to the benefits and the resources that it provides. We were talking a lot about land, and we couldn't agree more. So the GEF, the Global Environment Facility, has a policy on gender that we've been updating as we all learn more about the process and how it can be integrated into climate change and other areas that the GEF works. And the policy really address equality and promote women empowerment across our operations. The policy is structured in a way that all our operations, they do require to have a gender action plan. This is key to identify what are the gaps within the communities that we are working on to identify those gender gaps. And we do have indicators that are disaggregated by gender to help us measure the results of our operations. For this, it's really important that the work my fair colleagues on the panel are doing on the ground, all the work that Guatemala was mentioning before about all the plans that you are doing, the studies, is really helpful because for us, we usually in our operation ask the developers like to really identify what are the needs, what are the plans that are already in the country so we can build on those. So any plans that are in the country, studies, is really helpful for us to build on those and address the gaps that are already in the country based on the information that is there. So thank you so much for that work because it's extremely helpful for us. I also wanted to, there is still a long way to go, but I think all the work that you are doing is really helpful. The GEF just rolled out the new GEF-8 strategy, new programming directions, and gender has been mainstreamed in a more systematic way than it was in the past. So we look forward to continue working with all of you in updating the policies and mainstreaming gender in our operations. Also wanted to highlight, based on the information on the discussion that we have and the questions that we have from the public, is that we also have a small grant program that is, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but is driven by the communities, small grants that are allocated directly to the communities, and the communities are the ones who implement those grants. So I know sometimes we are working on a more upstream level through the governments, and sometimes takes time to get to the communities. But this is one of the programs that has been really successful since many years ago at the GEF, and we really encourage all of you to participate in that small program. And with that, I thank you so much to all of you for taking the time out of your busy COP agendas to attend this item. We look forward to continue engaging with as many of you as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you very much to all the speakers. Thank you very much to our commenters. Thank you to you. Today is Gender Day. Gender is not about one day. It's a life commitment. It's not a fashion. There is no other way to do work on climate change that is not gender responsive. Have a great day, and thank you very much to everyone. Oh, and we invite you to some breakfast, late breakfast, middle day lunch, whatever food is available. Thank you very much.